the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. Lema wo aha. That makes sense? I've been practicing that one. I have about 4 words now, maybe 5 by the time I leave. Thank you for this great honour that you've given me in inviting me here to preach today. And I particularly want to congratulate the choir on this tremendous anniversary and thank them for their great ministry of music. And I pray that many people will continue to discover their gifts of singing. Let's thank them again. 12 years ago, I went to Ghana. I wanted to see the place that so many of the church members that I knew in London called home. I wanted to know what they meant when they told me about the beaches and the markets and their churches and their communities. And so we travelled from Accra to Kumasi to Cape Coast and then back to Accra. And we met many wonderful people and received unsurpassed hospitality. And so much was different for the little group from our circuit in London who went on that trip. We were struck by the heat, by the long journeys, by the dust, by the noises, by the colour of so many different cloths and the skill with which whole outfits were suddenly created in front of our eyes. And yet, so much was also familiar. We were greeted by relatives of the church members I knew in London, and they showered us with food and gifts and love. It was as if there was an invisible thread connecting them to their family in London. And because we knew that family, we were also attached to that thread. And when we visited the churches, there were also differences. I was struck by the huge numbers of people at every service, even the ones that started at 7 o'clock in the morning. You don't need me to tell you that the churches were packed. I loved all the different choirs and fellowship groups and the pride with which everybody wore their uniform. I was also glad that I'd been introduced to dance-up collections in London, so I was prepared to some extent for the exuberance and number of offerings. And yet, through all of that difference, what we were doing was worshipping and giving glory to the very same God as I worship here in London. There were familiar hymns being sung, familiar readings being read. So there we were, thousands of miles from the place that I call home, and yet still connected and linked and together. I imagine most of you know what that feels like. Apart from me, you can do nothing, said Jesus, as part of his teaching about the image of the vine that we've just heard. If you've ever seen a vineyard, you will know how vines grow. Because once they are established, they go everywhere, sending out tendrils in all directions, full of leaves and stems and grapes. And that's just what it felt like for us in Ghana. We were there in a world of difference, and yet we had a connection. A connection to the family of the Worldwide Methodist Church, and a connection to certain people whose families are spread between Ghana and London. And all of this reminds me of a marvellously exuberant South African musical show called Umoja, a word that means togetherness. And this show uses all sorts of different music from different generations to celebrate the way that music brings people together in a world where there is so much focus on what drives people apart. And as the Ghanaian Methodist Fellowship Choir have demonstrated so richly for us today, music has a wonderful capacity to transcend difference and to bring people together. Being apart and being together. Just think for a moment of the way that this fellowship brings you together. You are here with fellow Ghanaians. You've come together to celebrate your common heritage, your common identity, and you've come to encourage one another. Here you can speak in Fanti, or Twi, or Akan, or other languages with people who understand what you are saying. You can talk about places with other people who also see that place in their mind's eye. You can worship in the ways you're comfortable to worship. Here you are together. So culture and music and fellowship and tradition and history and family and worship and language, all things that bring people together. So what is it that drives us apart? Well, often this happens when cultures clash. Look at the way so many people have tried and are still trying to create a so-called Islamic state, using a form of belief that is not true to the Muslim religion. They've done it by systematic destruction of communities of people who don't have the same worldview as they do. It happens when opinions clash too. You only need to think about the current British political situation for an example of that, to see groups of people who it seems are simply irreconcilable. These are separations made by human beings. But there are other separations that we all experience that are not caused by us. The ultimate one, of course, is the separation of bereavement. It's a wonderful thing when we can speak of somebody's death as a blessing, when they've lived their life and we believe the time was right and they were ready to go and meet their Lord. But as we all know, death does not always feel good or right or a blessing. And even when we can think of it like that, we still have to face the pain of separation. We can be very glad that the person we loved is now at peace and free from worry or pain or confusion, but still we have to face the fact that they are not with us anymore. They are apart, unreachable, and that creates horrible pain. And often it is in bereavement that communities come together. It's easier to bear a pain when we bear it together. Think of the crowds who have gathered after terrible things have happened in the Manchester Arena, or just here on Westminster Bridge, or after the Grenfell Tower fire. There, crowds of people have together transformed those places of horror with the beauty of flowers and the poignancy of written messages and the light of candles. Above all, they have transformed them with the power of being together, standing in solidarity to express hope and peace. Apart from me, said Jesus, apart from him. What does that actually mean? Well, oddly, in order to answer it, I want to first think about what it means to be together with Jesus. For the disciples, it meant learning from his words and actions, trying to follow them, copy them, see if they could be like he was, learning and copying and changing. They simply could not have been the people they became if they hadn't had that very close connection to Jesus. And the image of the vine shows us what this means. Every grape can only grow and ripen because it is connected to the vine. The vine gives the grape everything it needs to survive. And that must mean that being with Jesus is not only about being near and watching, it's about a deep connection that is vital to life. Not everyone was with Jesus together in that connected way. In fact, during his lifetime, only a handful of rather confused and fallible people could really be seen in that way. And yet he said those words, "Apart from me, you can do nothing." So what about all the other people who were clearly not close to him in the way that his disciples and friends and supporters were? Were they all bad, all wrong, all misguided? And what about today? You and I might feel we are with Jesus, close to him, so close that he gives us our life, as the vine gives life to the grapes. That is a wonderful feeling. But it inevitably challenges us to look at how we consider everyone else. The world is full of people who are not like you or me. And there is an enormous range of these people. At one end of the spectrum, there are people who we absolutely disagree with. For myself, that is where I think of terrorists, people who are motivated by extreme and what I think of as distorted ideologies, who consider their beliefs to have more value than the value even of another human life. And so death and destruction of other human beings seems to mean little in comparison with living by their form of faith. That's the extreme end of this spectrum of people who are not like us. But there are many, many, many others. People who think differently. People who have a different political opinion. People who worship God in different ways. People who have different traditions that might look rather odd to you or to me. Or even people who support a different football team to us. In some cultures, if you finish all the food on your plate, that is a sign that you have fully appreciated everything you've been given. In others, finishing your food is the ultimate in bad manners, because it's a way of telling your host that they had not provided enough for you. And it can be very hard for someone growing up in one of those cultures not to make an assumption about the way someone from the other culture has behaved. You know what I mean? There are millions and millions of people who live good lives, who care deeply for other people, who even go the second mile for others, but who do not express any particular religious faith. Therefore, in one sense, they are not like us. I wonder, would you say that all those people are apart from Jesus? "Apart from me, you can do nothing," he said. Well, our experience of life shows us that that is not true. People are not prevented from doing anything if they do not profess a faith. So what did Jesus mean? Well, it seems to me that we need to think about this differently. Who is it that creates the vine and invites people to be part of it? Remember that Jesus said, "Abide in me as I abide in you." This is not only offered to a few select, carefully chosen people, this is offered to all. Already Jesus abides in human beings. He's not waiting for our response. He's there already, coursing through our veins like our very lifeblood. The closeness of the relationship the disciples had with him is already there from his side. It's just given, with no strings attached. And this whole passage about the vine is a challenge to human beings to respond to what has already been given. So you could see these words, "Apart from me, you can do nothing," to mean that everyone is connected to Jesus. He's offering that connection unreservedly to all human beings. And Jesus has not only offered to abide in us and all people, but he has already done so. So nothing and no one is outside of his love and his care. From our perspective in Christian communities, this is the way we see it. I believe that in Jesus, God has shown how much human beings matter to him. He came into human life, so he knows what it's like. He's brought his love right into us, and I believe that is a relationship that is offered to all. And yet we know that other people all across the world, living in different traditions and cultures, respond to God in different ways. And here is the challenge. We might all like that lovely image of the vine, with its healthy green growing tendrils and with its juicy grapes. But in fact, this is not a gentle or a comforting passage at all. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers, he went on to say. And that is about our response. We have free will. The free will to respond by choosing to abide in him or not to. And that really matters. Do we want to bear fruit or do we not? I like to think of this as the potential or the gift that is planted in each one of us when we come into the world. And that potential is what makes some people good leaders, others wonderful musicians, other people good at sport, others very creative, others good with money, others deeply caring and endlessly patient, others able to bring the best out of other people. And if we choose to, we can respond to that gift from God by developing that potential, by making it the best it can be, by living it out, and in that way, giving it back to God. That, I believe, is what it means to abide in Jesus and live closely to him. But there is an enormous danger with this. The danger that we will stand as judge and jury over other people. I've already spoken about the people who we may feel separate from. Jesus spoke of the branch